Welcome to the Minnesota Stormwater Seminar Series, co-sponsored by the Water Resources Center and the St. Anthony Falls Laboratory, both at the University of Minnesota. The funding for this seminar series comes from the Minnesota Stormwater Research Council, who, by the way, are currently accepting nominations for the board. And you think you'll see this up here. They've been a little bit low on nominations this year, so they're asking for people, if you in the past have nominated somebody and they have not been accepted, well, this is a good year to nominate them. If there's somebody you know who is, you think might be a good person for the Stormwater Research Council, please nominate them. So I am John Gulliver, and I will introduce our speaker. We are very happy to have Roger Sutherland give today's talk. Roger is a stormwater resources engineer with 52 years of professional engineering experience in watershed and stormwater management, BMP modeling and design, stormwater pollutant load estimation, urban hydrology, riverine hydraulics, and floodplain mapping. Roger is an international expert in street sweeping and urban water stormwater modeling. He's also the principal author of a state-of-the-art urban stormwater quality modeling package called Symptom, which has been used on numerous street sweeping projects. Roger has a BS in civil engineering and an MS in water resources engineering, both from the University of Maryland. He's a professional engineer in the state of Oregon. So for many years, Roger was a voice in the wilderness, advocating for street cleaning. It seems that nobody was listening for many years. He sees street cleaning as a primary value-driven stormwater control method that needs to be based on real-world metrics. He is advocating modern sweeper evaluation protocols incorporating trash, sediment, and now microplastics pickup. So please join me in welcoming Roger Sutherland.
Thanks, John. All right, well, thank you, John. I really appreciate that introduction. Before I get started, I want to say just a couple of things. You'll see, maybe not just initially, but down the line, you'll see some slides that are, pretty wordy. There's a lot of information on these slides, and it's very possible that I'll advance before you can even have a chance to read it. But the reason I'm doing this is because I don't necessarily expect everyone to get everything I'm saying and to learn it all. And it's a resource. So this is available online, as you know. In addition, I have a number of links, including one link that features an interview with Mike Trojan and an interview with Randy Nesbitt. And that is available. Not obviously, if you're listening in the virtual, it would not be available to you, but when they post it, I'm told that those links will be available and active. And many of the links that I have actually go to a resource called worldsweeper.com. If you've never heard of this before, this is the world's most informative resource in terms of power sweeping. And the editor of that is my good friend and colleague, Ranger Kidwell Ross. We've known each other for well over close to 30 years, and I think we've been on the same crusade for that period of time as well. So all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. In the first patent for street sweeper occurred in 1849 by a gentleman by the name of C.S. Bishop. And by 1900, there was over 300 patents had been filed. And of course, the purpose of sweeping initially was to, pick up or move away anyways to the curb or the edge of the street, the dog poop and similar waste products. But it's interesting, Charles B. Brooks, an Afro-American from Newark, New Jersey, patented the first self-propelled street sweeper in 1896. And based on the picture that you see about the turn of the century in Chicago, Illinois, with a horse drawn, that the emphasis was on cosmic results and not water quality, hence the flushing. So we have known from the late 50s to the early 60s that stormwater is polluted. And it was basically in this time frame, people all over the world were just getting a beaker of stormwater and doing a chemistry analysis on it and saying, oh my God, look what's in there. We've got sediment, we've got organics, we've got nutrients, we've got heavy metals, we've got toxics. And so this was going on, but the first comprehensive study of stormwater pollution occurred in 1969. It was actually funded by APWA, and they actually did the work themselves, and it was done in Chicago, and they determined through their work that the primary source of urban stormwater pollution is first debris and contaminants from streets. I guess I could use the pointer at this point, but I'm just going to read them for you. Contaminants from open land areas, publicly used chemicals, air deposited substances, ice controlled chemicals, and dirt and contaminants washed from vehicles. So that's a pretty long list. But they also found that the most easily controllable source of pollutant is the debris and contaminant from streets. In addition to that, the study noted that the most significant component in terms of producing pollution through runoff was this dirt and dust fraction, which was really the fraction of about 1/8 of an inch or less. So you're talking 2,000 microns or less, and there is the definition of street dirt. So because of this study, EPA decided that we're finally going to spend some money and do our own study. So they came up with the resources and funded a study that was published in 1972 called Water Pollution Aspects of Street Surface Contaminants. What they did is they sampled street dirt, that dirt and dust fraction, if you will, at 8 different cities throughout the United States. And they determined that street dirt is highly contaminated with runoff pollutants, so it's just not a Chicago thing. Most street dirt was inorganic mineral like sand and silt, and most of the pollution was associated with the fines. Here's a table from that report. And if you look at solids, note that over half of the solids appear to be, let's say call it 250, because 250 is a sieve we always use when we collect and sieve street dirt. So over half of the solids are there, but look at the pollutants. If you look at all the pollutants, and there's a list of them on the left there, notice that the amount of pollution associated with the 250 micron or less ranged from anywhere from 34 to 92%. So, okay, let me set the stage for you. The year is 1973. I was not as, let's say I was much better looking than I am now. But I just graduated from the University of Maryland in December. I immediately got a job, took a job at a consulting firm in Baltimore. And also, for those that perhaps didn't realize, the Clean Water Act was passed in October of 1972. So it was with rather short order, I realized that I did not want to be designing storm sewer systems for the rest of my career. I knew I needed to go back to school. So I contacted my professor I knew at the University of Maryland. I said, hey, I want to come back to school. You got any grants or any programs? He said, yeah, we got this 208 grant from the new Clean Water Act. You heard about the new Clean Water Act? I said, yeah, I actually have. And he says, sure, when do you think of starting? I said, I'm thinking about the fall term starting. He said, oh, yeah. Plus, we just hired this new guy, Dr. Richard McEwen. You know, he just graduated from Georgia Tech, and he's going to be taking over, so he's going to be your primary. I said, okay, fine. Assume you're interested in water quality? I said, yeah, I'm interested in that. So that's how it started. And what did I do? I sat down. I went to the Library of Congress. I'm in Maryland. The other study, one I had to get declassified to be able to look at, and everything I could find, 8.5 and 11, maybe that tall. That's it. So I started thinking to myself, right, Mike? It's just common sense. The primary pollution source is this contaminated material that's accumulating on urban streets. What's the way that we're going to be able to attack it? Because that has to be the first line of defense. We got to pick that up whenever we can. And we know we won't be able to pick all of it up. It's called street sweeping. So from the get-go, I was focused on street sweeping because common sense told me it had to be the first line of defense. And so I started my work. Richard McEwen is a modeler. He taught me how to build mathematical models. I started building a mathematical model. That model has evolved to the point where it's called the simplified particulate transport model. And it's different than the models that you've used. It is sediment transport-based wash-off. It's accumulation, wash-off, it's continuous, plus it understands the interaction of street sweeping and catch basin capture and cleaning as it relates to all the processes in that continuous simulation. So let's fast forward to the year, actually 1982, but the work started in the 1980s. The EPA decided, wow, we really need to start looking at what we can do to solve this problem. Not just street sweeping, but it was included all of the other things that we can do. Street sweeping was included. I was involved in 2 of these 4 states that were involved. They started and they decided, we want to study the effectiveness of street sweepers in reducing the event mean concentration when we have a swept and an unswept. That could either be a paired basin or it could be a serial basin where I'm going to sweep it for a while and monitor it, and then I'm going to not sweep it for a while and monitor it. Whatever. 10 sites, 5 pollutants, 50 site pollutant opportunities, 4 states, North Carolina, Illinois, Washington, and Wisconsin. Now, it was the unexplainable negative results in 2 sites in North Carolina and 1 in Wisconsin that gave us this statement that literally set us back, I would estimate at least 30, if not 40 years. Street sweeping is generally ineffective as a technique for improving the quality of urban runoff. They arrived at this conclusion despite the fact that the data showed EMC decreases in 34 of the 50 site pollutant investigations. 78% went down. But because they couldn't explain why the others didn't, they said, nah, we're not going to bother with it. And the last line is so important. Statistically indeterminate is the phrase. Results have hampered sweeping's perceived BMP value for stormwater runoff pollution ever since. So, but we now know, and when I say we, I know, because I have a model that can do this, that has simulated this. We know why that occurred. These EMC increases resulted from the fact that the street sweepers of that era couldn't hardly even pick up anything less than 2,000 microns. So what happened is that sweeper would go by and pick up all this material, and it would basically expose all of this other material available, right? It did pick up some of it, but very, very little. So interestingly, the high intensity rainstorms occur where? Of those 4 states? North Carolina. North Carolina, 9 out of the 10 pollutant site opportunities went negative. In other words, the unswept was higher than the swept. Where's the low intensity storms? My neck of the woods. Bellevue, Washington. That's one of the projects I worked on with Bob Pitt. And notice that 10 out of those 10 showed a decrease or at least no change in the EMC. And when you throw where's the Midwest, well, it's sort of in the middle in terms of rainfall intensity, and they had 23 out of 30 times it was a positive reduction. So that's 77%. So my point is that we should have done a much better job of looking at the data and realizing we're doing this for the first time. Do you think there's some errors involved? Now, I could go on forever about, are there some errors when we sample with a continuous sample in a storm sewer? Yeah, of course there are, but this was not known. So I want to talk about the good news. The good news is that the street sweepers of today, even the mechanical broom sweepers, and we'll be chatting about the different types, have improved dramatically. In fact, I was contacted in 2008 by the Elgin Sweeper Corporation. They wanted me to test 4 of their machines. They contacted me because I'd already done testing in Seattle and Portland and Washington, D.C. So I already had 3 examples of this protocol that I established. So I said, fine, put a contract together. I have complete control. I mixed up the pixie dust. I brought the pixie dust. I put it down. They swept it. I sucked it up. I took it with me. So no way could they impact those results. It was total transparency. That was the rule when I put it out there. This is going to be public information. Are you guys ready? Yes, we're ready. And look at what it showed. What an amazing pickup. That doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't tweak that machine and make it run like it was, like it really should always be running. But the reality is that that kind of an achievement, 86.4%, can occur and did occur, and there's a link to that study. However, we did test it with water, and in that condition, which was a parking lot in Illinois with an extruded curb and a tented structure, we found that water being used to reduce fugitive dust reduced it by 20%. So that was obviously a concern. But here's the better news. Modern air sweepers that did not even exist. Temco invented the first regenerative air commercially available about 1980, but it was not very popular. So it didn't exist. They've vastly increased the ability for us to pick up the street dirt, and especially the fine material. And then when you look at the same study, the same length, you can see how well their regen did. And even their vacuum, they had a vacuum that we tested, but pickup performance of 90 to 95% was documented. Okay, these are brand new machines, understand. Don't expect that that's going to happen maybe on your first run through the route. Over time, it's going to be less, and we know that because, well, I've done more testing since this, obviously. So let's fast forward to the year 2010. Now remember, I've got a computer model. I've been winning studies, Livonia, Michigan, Jackson, Michigan. I'm doing work back in Portland. I'm doing work up in Seattle. I'm doing work down in the Southeast in Arizona. And I am so excited when I see San Diego release this targeted aggressive street sweeping pilot in the year 2010. And you know what? He said, we're going to do something different. We're not going to use an automatic sampler. We're going to identify 3 sites that are going to be identical as far as we're concerned, same neighborhood, whatever, next block over. And we're going to identify, we're going to unsweep, leave one unswept, which was a little bit of a problem because the residents want to know why their street wasn't being swept. We're going to use a mechanical on the second one and then a vacuum. So they're going to use a broom machine, and they captured 3 storms. And here's the results. Because they sampled that water as it left the gutter, as it was flowing into the catch basin by hand. And they went through the analysis and look at the results. TSS reduced by 74% by mechanical broom, 85% by the vacuum. Reduction for metals, which was of great interest, as you can see in this table, like 60% for as high as 83% for a vacuum. I saw this, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. No, why? Maybe I wasn't getting those high numbers, but I was simulating these kinds of numbers. I was publishing these kinds of numbers, and people were telling me that I was nuts. So the point is that I thought this would be the one, John. I thought, okay, now we're all going to get together, have a Kumbaya moment and move forward. But that didn't happen. It took another 9 years. This is the game changer. when John Sansaloni decided to get involved in it. I've been pestering him for years to finally get involved in this. Studies by the University of Florida over a 12-year period in association with the Florida Stormwater Association involving 12 to 14 MS4s found street sweeping was the best BMP, up to almost 7 times more cost effective than the next best BMP for total nitrogen and total phosphorus recovery. Why? How did he get to this conclusion? He said, listen, I'm not gonna go sample stormwater. It's like almost a fool's errand. And that's what the late great Dr. Gary Minton said. I want to look at the things that MS4s are doing to remove pollution from stormwater. And I want to find out how much pollution they have removed from stormwater. If they pick it up, they've removed it. Now, you could argue that point, but that's the way he approached it. And then I'm going to calculate the mass of the various pollutants with the focus being on these nutrients, because Florida's got to focus on nutrients just as much as Minnesota does. And then I'm going to calculate the cost of capturing a pound of it. And by the way, street sweeping was the lowest cost per pound. Catch basin cleaning was second in all instances. And here's the numbers for nitrogen. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. The difference between number 1 and number 2 is like 6.5. So a 6.5 increase, 6.5 times more. If I look at the median of all the various in-pipe type technologies that he was evaluating, that difference is about 11 times. Let's go to phosphorus. Phosphorus is a lot more expensive, but the difference between number 1 and number 2 is almost 7 times. It's just a shade under it. But look at the difference between number 1 and the median of everything else. It's like 40 times more expensive. So what can we say? Well, as John said, recovery of particulate material matters, and that proves that picking up street dirt matters as well. They found that street sweeping was the most economical and dominant practice that MS4s could implement and optimize in order to maximize nutrient, basically, and particulate material recovery. Now, they did this study and they didn't even separate the MS4s that were using broom sweepers versus air sweepers. I'm telling you, we asked John, what would it take to go back and do that? And he said, it wouldn't take much, but I don't have it now. In other words, if the money were available, he'll go back to that data set and he'll show you what the difference is, and that the air machines will pop even more. And so the study showed conclusively that the more an MS4 recovers, the more pollutants they reduce, and therefore, here's the statement I was waiting a lifetime to be able to read to you. The study results are statistically defensible in a 95% confidence level when combining all 14 MS4s for PM, TN, and TP. There's a link to an article about the studies in World Sweeper, and then also the study itself can be found. So finally, we're going to get to the topic. And so I'm going to be moving quickly, but hopefully covering a lot of information. So if you want to maximize the environmental value of your street sweeping program, make it an enhanced street sweeping program. An enhanced street sweeping program is specifically designed to focus on the maximum reduction of pollutants and microplastics traditionally found in stormwater runoff, such as organics, nutrients, heavy metals, toxics, particulate material, or TSS. By the way, the last two can become airborne and then create problems for you from a air quality standpoint. The ability of a street sweeper to pick up accumulated street dirt and contaminants is based on these items, and we're going to cover each one of them. Parked car interference is number 1. Period. End of story. You want to be enhanced? You want the enhanced label? You have to move the cars. And interesting, in our conversation at dinner last night when I went to the panelists, is that Randy pointed out, is that in this area, you're used to having to move your car, but it's for a snowplow, okay? So maybe from a political standpoint, this won't be a very difficult sell. And I'll show you why in a minute. Remember, 1 single parked car equals 3 vehicle lengths. Street sweeper comes away from the curb, goes by it, 2, goes back to the curb, okay? That's 1 equals 3. But wait a minute, Roger. What if there's 2 parked cars right next to you? Oh, okay, so 2 equals 4. No, what if they're they're 1 car length apart, 2 equals 5? What if they're 2 car lengths apart? 2 equals 6? What if they're 3 car lengths apart? What operator do you know is going to pull away from the curb, go by and risk taking 2 side view mirrors off to sweep 1 curb length on the curb? No one. So really, 2 car lengths could equal 7. You put a bunch of them together and you didn't sweep a thing. So that's why it's so important that we recognize that we have to remove it. And if you do this, if you have a program where you're not removing and you do have parking densities that are impeding your sweeping, that's important too. If everyone's got a driveway and they're not parking on the street, it's okay. You don't have to move them down. You don't have to put them through that. But the reality is, you do that, you're going to see a 30 to 70% increase in the amount of material that you're picking up, just like that. And you say, well, implementing a program that can be very difficult, and I understand. So what you need is you need to develop a citizen-friendly car removal program. Thank God for technology. Technology changes everything. We already have phone computer apps, mobile applications that says, oh crap, I gotta move my car today, right? And that app can say, oh wow, they're not gonna sweep today because the sweeper's down. I don't have to move my car. We've already got that. We already have GPS apps that can say, I can go online and say, oh, I see where all the sweepers are. Unfortunately, the part we're missing is knowing where they're going. Just because you can see the sweeper, unless you know the route, unless you have researched the route. So we haven't linked that together, not yet, but it's on its way. And that, if we can do that, so we say, hey, you don't have to move it for 4 hours or whatever. You can literally move it, go run an errand, know when the sweeper is, get a notification when it's a mile out, run an errand, drive around the block, do whatever you need to do, put your car right back. It's not going to be that much of an inconvenience. That makes it a much easier sell to people. Explain to them how contaminated this stuff is. And then what's most important is the lower. You have to do this in combination with a ticketing program. Put that iPhone 17 mounted on the dashboard of that street sweeper. Believe me, that technology already exists. It'll read that license plate. There's no question you just obstructed my street sweeper and you're going to get a ticket. And you can actually send the ticket directly to the information directly to the department. So unfortunately, I just eliminated the parking enforcement job for this function. But hey, that's just, and the bottom line, we don't like to talk about the bottom line, but it's real. And the difference can be like 30 to 50% of your program. You put this in, even, we don't know if we did all of this, whether where that number would go down. But that's how much revenue you can generate from tickets, even if you're doing a lot of things. At least we believe it'll be the low end of that number and not the high end, for 30 to 50. So let's just talk for a moment on sweeper. Oh my goodness, I almost missed this, Maggie. Remember, citizen education minimizes citizen friction, okay? Educate your citizens about sweeping, pollutant removal value. Have touch-a-truck events, handouts, web pages. Develop, this one's so important, grade-specific education models for schools. Have the children teach the parents. And how about naming contests for new sweepers? Sweeps a lot is the best I've ever heard. So, understand 1 parked car equals 3, but 2 parked cars could end more 4 to 7. All right, multiple cars parked on a block randomly, no sweeping gets done. And the areas left unswept are very unsightly and unhealthy, and they're obvious too. If you've seen like cars that are there forever, it just accumulates everything in there. So maximize it and get the vehicles out of the way. Now we're going to talk about, did I miss a slide? No, I might have. No. Okay, yeah, sweeper, my bad. let's talk about sweeper types. This is the one that's pretty busy. We have mechanical broom sweepers. That's a main broom churning across the machine, throwing the material on a conveyor belt that's going to the hopper. Don't confuse that broom with the gutter broom. The gutter broom is required for every sweeper. An air machine has to throw the material in front of the air, the regen, and so that's very important. And we simply, if you want to be an enhanced sweeping program, unless you're running a tandem operation, and there's a link to a tandem sweeping that we evaluated in the late 1990s, that is the best sweeping operation, but it's going to cost you twice the amount of equipment. Put that mechanical out front and put that air machine right behind it, and you will be amazed at how effective you will approach those 90%, even with older machines, because of what's happening in terms of it's impacting the particle size distribution of the material. So vacuum sweepers, they're recommended, but do understand that a vacuum sweeper is exhausting the air continuously. So it can generate a lot more fugitive dust, and that might be a concern. But I have to tell you something. In the work that we did, the testing we did in Los Angeles about 3 weeks ago, we had 2 vacuums, one the RAV and one the Scarab. These are both Fayette machines, manufactured in Europe, oh dear. And they did a much better job on that fugitive dust compared to some of it. And we know that because we were monitoring fugitive dust generation. So we recommend them, but the highly recommended is the regenerative air, and as we can say, and the reason is it regenerates the air, so it only exhausts a very small fraction of the air. So you don't have that issue, and we've found it to be more effective, just slightly more effective than the vacuum. And then I got another one down there. What the hell is that one? Oh, well, that's another term I made up. High efficiency sweepers. So I want to make people realize that we're not done. We need to figure out, so we give the mechanical engineers something to do. We need to figure out how we can remove that, we can control that fugitive dust. So it isn't going down in a cloud of dust. It's going to generate it. And a lot of times it can be water on the gutter broom. It can be shrouding the gutter broom. That can work. That's the kind of thing. But I wanted to focus 2 of them, both Temco, the inventor of regenerative air. They have a DS4 and a DS6. These have been purchased at places that are dealing with very fine material, cement factories and this sort of thing. That very effective. But there's an issue. The issue is related to the filters and how long you can sweep. So we're not there yet necessarily for residential sweeping, and that the cost of that is like, much more expensive than even the regen. It's maybe a 50% kicker on that. So that's the issue. But you know what? It's up to the stormwater community to demand and support when they meet that demand, better sweeping technology. Let's get rid of the mechanical machines unless we want to operate them tandemly. So let's talk about operation and maintenance. There's a lot of things. You see what I'm saying? Your MS4 appointment says sweep? What? Are you kidding me? Tell me something. Give me a guideline. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. And that's what we're missing. But I think we're working on that being different in the future. Maintain the equipment. It's simple. You just have to maintain it. You can't afford not to maintain it. Forward speed, really important. I always thought, we go as fast as 8 to 10. It's just going to be horrible, That hasn't turned out to be the case, but not always. The data we just collected in LA kind of went the other way. It looked like you can go faster than go slow, but that was because of operator error. In any case, if we're only losing 10 or 15% pickup going faster here, but I can cover twice as much, did I remove more pollution in a day? Yes. So these are the things that you have to be looking at. You got to be looking at frequency. The most important thing about frequency is that it fits the accumulation. And as I'll show you in a minute, you better try to figure out what the accumulation is so it can fit the accumulation. And then there's going to be times like when leaf drop is, where you have to be really aggressive. And the thing by say don't sweep, I don't want you sweeping a downtown area daily, and I don't want you sweeping it biweekly. Why don't you just throw your money away? You're using a 300,000 plus piece of equipment to pick up McDonald's cups, The accumulation over 1 week, even in the downtown corridor, it's not going to be worth it. If you really think it's a problem, hire some at-risk youth, give them a job. That's what they did in the old day. They rolled around a cart and picked all this stuff up by hand. That's cheaper, believe me, than running a sweep. Free that up for your residential sweeping or your industrial, commercial, or your major arterials, to be honest with you. So the most important thing we learned in this class is operator experience and skill. Historically, operating a street sweeper, maybe that's changed, but it's not a glamorous job, and yet it should be. They are the first line of defense. There's a war, and they're wagering it. And I used to go to Clean Water Services in Washington County, Oregon, when I was a much younger man, and I would motivate these guys. I would say, you guys, your job is so important. When you see for whatever reason, the guy was doing his yard work or whatever, he's got all this crap on the street, slow down, pick it up, do your job. You have to know when to slow down, when to change. And now the technology, you can adjust your gutter brooms. There are all many kinds of things that a sweeper operator can do. These have to be skilled operators, just like anyone operating a huge piece of construction equipment. And that's the culture that we need to create. And the last item in that long list was, pavement condition and barriers, okay? Street sweepers have difficulty picking up street dirt on pavements classified as port of fair. And that's due to the cracks and deep depressions where dirt can accumulate. Uneven surfaces are hard, especially for air machines. It loses the suction on the regen. It's got it there. Blow the air down, try to cross the head, suck it up on the other side. If it's uneven, it's like a vacuum. You're vacuuming, it doesn't do as good a job. So what I'm saying is support repaving projects. Understand that when they repave a street, the water quality that's going to come off of that is greatly reduced. Bob Pitt proved that in 1987. Read his doctoral thesis. So that's why I've tried research, highway people. I said, we should do a study to show you the value of these repaving. People wouldn't necessarily oppose them because they're expensive. And then here's the most important thing. We know street dirt accumulates very close to barriers, curbs, New Jersey barriers. If there is no barrier, don't sweep that on a regular basis. Now, I know politically you got to sweep it every once in a while. Okay, sweep it every once in a while, But the point of the matter is that I'm actually spending too much time on all of this. So we're going to have to really move. Okay. You want to do some things? You really want to find out what's happening? Street dirt accumulation monitoring. Bob Pitt taught me in Reno, Nevada in 1980 how to do that. This is happening in Los Angeles, California right now with a brand new study that's just starting up. So go out there, find your street dirt. There's a link there to a presentation that talks about that technique. It's not that hard. The equipment doesn't cost that much. It's the manpower you have to provide. How about, I'm sorry. The streets, did I miss one? No, I didn't. Oh, yeah, okay. Street sweeper pickup performance. In other words, this is in situ. In other words, you're doing a randoming sampling like you're monitoring street dirt, but you're out there just before you know they're going to sweep. And you do your random sampling, and then you go out the day after they sweep and you do your random sampling. Can you see a difference from your existing operation? Is it making a difference? It's important to know that. Because if it isn't, then you might want to consider testing the pickup performance of the street sweepers you currently have and using this type of a procedure, a test procedure that you would go through. And those are the various steps. And so this is where I'm telling you, I've got a lot of information, but you can see I'm obviously not going to be able to cover it all. And there's some links, pickup performance testing. The Elgin work I told you again, Los Angeles 2 years ago, tested 2 machines and showed the mechanical was 35%, regenerative air was 75%. So I want to give a heads out to Jill Murray, who called me how many years ago? 2 years ago, and said, "Oh my God, this project, I'm retired. I'm not, okay, I'll put it." So the city of Santa Barbara got a sea grant from NOAA to investigate microplastics. And so I'm working with the University of California at Santa Barbara. Professor Patricia Holden is the contact you would want to talk to. And we did some street sweeper testing. There's the link. We just completed that. And the whole purpose of this was to, for the first time anywhere in the world, we have scientifically placed 5 different types of microplastics into the street dirt simulant that we created, that they created with my recipe. And now we made 14 runs of 6 different sweepers. So we have this data. I can't show you any of the data right now because that's a whole different other presentation. But here's the pros and cons of street sweeping. And you can see there's disadvantages, but hopefully we've covered those. And we really need to focus on the fact that sweeping is the most effective, and it costs the least. And here's I just need to read this to you because it's so important. With conventional BMPs, this is Dr. John Sansaloni, University of Florida, particulate material removal costs, dollars per pound, anywhere from $4 to $41. For street sweeping, the cost for moving a pound of particulate was 10 cents. That is really the only thing people need to know. And, there's some other things. Making a plug from the model. I'm retired from using the model, but Seth Yellen is 13 years younger than me. He works at WPS, which is actually a Canadian firm, but they have offices all over the country. So, if you're really interested in doing this right, it's not going to cost that much to get the data that you need. And here's the last thing. I shout out to Ranger. So many of these slides are from Ranger, by the way. Forgot to mention that. But make the sweeper the eyes of your community. The technology is going to happen if it hasn't happened already. Oregon City mapped the potholes in town using their street sweeper because they drive these routes every day. And so make sure, if this is something you're interested, go for it, learn more about it. What is it you want to see? Abandoned vehicles, down tree lines, all kinds of things. It can become the source. Instead of driving a guy around in a pickup, the street sweeper with a camera looking for this stuff can get that information. And so, and here's my shout out to Minnesota. There's the link where you can hear the interview with Mike Trojan, who's in the audience, and also Randy, who's going to be talking on the panel. And I, in my defense, when I first learned to pick up street dirt, I asked Bob Pitt, I said, "What are we doing with this organic material?" And he goes, "Nah, we don't analyze that." And I go, "Why not?" And he says, "Because a street sweeper will pick it up." I've never seen organic a street sweeper won't pick up. And so that means from the very beginning, we were focused on one thing. And that's important to know that. But obviously, down the road, it became quite obvious that it can be a tremendous source. And as Mike points out in that interview, it's not just the leaves, it's not the TP, it's the dissolved phosphorus that is not becoming the dissolved phosphorus because you picked up the leaf. Very important. There's a link to that. So shout out to Minnesota. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to slowly scroll through these slides so you can see it online, and then you can stop it and look at it. But Ranger Kidwell Ross was kind enough to put this together. You want to know what an enhanced street sweeping program is? These are the things that you do. What we have like a CRS for street sweeping. If you get already to number 13, you'll give you a, how many gold stars, Randy? I don't know. Any case, there's a link to his webpage. And believe it or not, Andy, I'm done.
Thank you, Roger. Yes, let's take some questions. Yes, Mike Trojan. Yes.
Come on, make it an easy one.
Here in Minnesota, where we have a fall leaf drop followed by frozen soils for several months, we're finding a lot of phosphorus in spring runoff. What are your thoughts about encouraging citizens to sweep their leaves into the street during the fall leaf drop?
Well, that's a softball, thank you. That's exactly what the city of Portland's been doing for decades. As you know, they're the inventor of leaf compost, and they needed leaves, and they needed the community to participate. So they said, hey, let's sweep the leaves, just sweep your leaves in the street, but leave a channel for the runoff, because we won't be able to get to everyone's leaves on day one, but we're gonna do this over a 2-week period. So, make sure there's a channel, and if there's not a channel there, someone will knock on your door and leave you a ticket. So that's what they've been doing. I don't know how many tickets they've left, but that's what they're doing. And then they attack the leaves, Mike, with a machine that comes in. And so they're not necessarily using street sweepers. My understanding, they have leaf pickup machines that shred it and deliver it in a dump truck that's rolling right along with that. So those technologies exist. I think it makes a lot of sense. And for you that didn't know that, John Sansaloni, some of the work he did before he did the project I talked about, he looked at snow melt, and oh my God, is it dirty. It is so polluted. And if you don't deal with this stuff, aggressively street sweeping, leaf removal, all the things you need to do before the spring, that's a problem. And the new technologies that are coming out, the ones from Netherlands, they're designed to actually sweep in the winter because they don't need to use water. They can sweep effectively if there's pavement available. And you know how that works. Sometimes there's pavement, sometimes there's not pavement. My wife grew up in Marquette, Michigan, so I know about cold weather. I was in Chicago for 3 or 4 years.
Okay, do we have a question from online?
We do. Our first online question for today is, with the removal of cars being an important factor to enhancing sweeping, how are cities to handle trash and recycling cans?
Well, don't schedule the street sweeping routes on the day in which that is happening. That's number one. Street sweeping frequencies in the residential. We looked at in Livonia, Michigan in 2002 with SimPTM, and we aggressively collected street dirt at a number of sites. And for the residential communities, we ended up with an optimal street sweeping of 3 weeks, once every 3 weeks. That's tough for scheduling, You can make it happen, I guess, especially with better technology and notifying. But every 2 weeks seems to be quite popular for residential areas, medium density residential. Light residential, you can get away with monthly. It's all about where the accumulation. You have millions of dollars invested in this. Send those machines based on the science that you develop. So spend $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 to go around and collect street dirt at different times of the year in different locations. And that'll give you the answer you need without having to use a really fancy computer model. So.
Another question from inside the house?
Thanks, John. So EPA was involved in street sweeping way back when.
Correct.
And essentially completely blew it. Worse than completely blew it, actually set it back. Since the newer research has come along, has EPA been engaged? And if so, how? And if not, how do you think they should be?
Randy, I don't know. I really am no longer in touch with them. I was pretty disappointed when I wrote a proposal in 1970, and I still have it. And it was not even considered, instead. And I was there disappointed again when I heard that the swim model was going to go to version 5.0. I sent the code to Erickson. I love the man. He's a great person. He's done so many good things for the water resources community. But the reality is he didn't put that code in there. It was not important. So I've developed a model that no one really wants to care to use until perhaps maybe now. And I always suggest get the model, calibrate the model, prove that the model can reproduce the behavior, and then generate your own set of numbers. It's not real, I get it, but guess what? You can do your analysis, your statistical analysis. You can run this alternative, that one. We did that in Israel. We did that across Israel Highway. Many of these references are available at ResearchGate, and you can see that, or I've published them in StormCom. Yeah, and it showed. We were interested in chromium. If we use sweeping, we knocked that chromium, just a few dots up there. Before it was chromium all over the place. That was generated by a computer model. Is it real? I don't know. You want to spend $22 million collecting that many samples? You find out. Why bother? So, next question. I think they need a role. The answer to that question is they do need a role. They need to say, we made a mistake and we're sorry, but let's move forward. I'm not going to hold a grudge. Let's move forward. I'm just happy to be alive to see it. That's all.
Okay, another question from online.
Can you share your thoughts on methods and costs associated with the processing, disposal, and/or harvesting of material captured via street sweeper activities?
Yes, this is definitely a concern. It's an issue. Ranger has quite a bit of information on his website about it. I was involved in the city of Portland and where they were taking it to a landfill. I said, do you want to fight so hard against them calling it toxic material? I mean, yes, it's contaminated, but don't believe anyone's going to go out there and get a scoop of street dirt, put it in a glass, stir it up, and have a swig. I mean, let's be realistic about it. As soon as you give it like a contaminated material, a hazardous material, the H word, then your costs just ratchet up. So you need to collect it. A lot of people are sieving it. They're actually in need of material, and they're using it, but they always use it not in below porous pavement, use it below regular pavement, and you can sieve it. It's actually got all those fractions in there. It's just kind of amazing stuff. It all depends on, it'll mimic the geology of your area. Your street dirt will look a lot like that because it's actually one of the primary sources. So, but yeah, it has to be disposed of, and the primary way is taking it to a landfill. That's one of your cost of your operation, and you just have to roll it into it, and that's just the way it has to be. You don't, unless you can utilize it in some other way. I don't think you can use the organics for composting because they're just too contaminated.
Okay, we have another question from in-house.
So a lot of, this kind of goes back to your response to Randy's question. A lot of watersheds are working on their street sweeping optimization studies. A lot of them around here are working off of Paula's models and some other information, really focused on getting the leaves and the phosphorus out, which is great. Is there a similar, you mentioned the chromium and having to go through an absurd level of sampling to
Right.
develop something similar. Are there similar sampling efforts that have been done to capture some of those more toxic things?
Once again, shout out to Minnesota. I didn't say it. You're the second state in the nation to tie credit in your MPDS permitting to the collection of this contaminated material. Florida, believe it or not, Florida was the first, largely because of the involvement of those MS4s. And John said, listen, if you didn't do the work, you don't get the credit. Very smart man. So all of the MS4s in Florida have been clamoring to do what needed. You don't have to go through the whole study, but his point is collect enough information to prove to me that your street dirt is similar to the street dirt we found, which, that's a reason to motivate people. But, it's like, what is the number? Mike talks about it in his interview with Ranger. There's a risk of giving them too much credit. I agree with you, Mike. You have to be somewhat conservative about that. But at some point in time, you have to recognize if research money is available, let's go find out what the real answer is. Because unfortunately, Mr. Schuler, I love you, but the reality is that you were wrong. It's not that low. And so many people still believe that's like 8 to 10%. phosphorus reduction credit. No, I've got a model that says it's closer to 30. And you think that's probably where it's going to land. But I understand being cautious. But the fact is that you're on that trail. You are in that environment. You're looking at that. You're going to make it better. Paula is going to make it better, over time with everyone's help. Sorry, Paula. Okay.
Okay, I'll save the last question for myself.
Okay.
There's been talk in Minnesota of street sweeping in the winter to pick up road salt because we have a lot of road salt that collects. What do you think about that? And do you think that could be a cost-effective way of treating for chloride problems?
So isn't there a risk that the road salt's going to dissolve before you can get to it?
I don't know.
I mean, it's salt. So it's not sediment. If sediment, won't move. But I think road salt is a concern. But then you always have to ask yourself, what is the alternative? And Andy and I were discussing that just yesterday, as a matter of fact, because it is a big concern, especially when you're finding chloride leaching out, throughout the year as a result of that when it wasn't supposed to happen. So I don't think a street sweep will be very effective in it unless it's just exposed. The event occurred, it didn't really happen. You put all that salt out there, maybe go pick it up then.
No, we have salt that
That's caked
that
up.
basically goes back into a solid and then is spread all over our streets. And it's
Oh,
actually
okay.
pretty.
Well, I've never tested a sweeper in that, but it did get yourself an air machine. Don't try a mechanical. or
Right,
something.
yeah, yeah.
And the other thing is, remember, the stormwater is flowing in the gutter, right? So if you don't do anything but throw it back into the street, it'll be helpful. But this is a soluble thing, so yeah, I don't think that makes sense. It might make sense in other pollutants where you can maybe not necessarily pick it up, but you can move it out of the gutter. So when it's in contact with moving water to go downstream, it won't be. So, but I'd give it a try. I've never even thought about that, John.
Okay, all right,
That's a stumper.
all right. Thank you, Roger. So let's give Roger another round of applause.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Minnesota Stormwater Seminar Series. My name is Andy Erickson. It's my honor and privilege to be able to moderate our panel discussion today. I will introduce our speakers. I will ask for their relation to the topic, and then we will dive into your questions. If you have questions here in the room, just raise your hand. We'll come around with the mic. If you have questions online, please post them in the Q&A box in Zoom. Without further ado, we'll dive right in. Our first panelist is Maggie Karschnia, who is an extension educator at the Water Resources Center and Minnesota Sea Grant here at the University of Minnesota. So Maggie, from your perspective and experience, how do you relate to this topic, and what can you share about the local Minnesota context on street sweeping?
Hello, thanks, Andy. First off, it's just so great to be here on this panel on this really critical topic in stormwater. I'm just really grateful to be in Minnesota, where we've made significant investments in research, programming, and also state and local funding to make enhanced street sweeping happen. I relate to this topic because I lead the Clean Sweep program. If you're not familiar, it's a partnership program between the University of Minnesota Water Resource Center, Minnesota Sea Grant, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. It's funded through the Minnesota Stormwater Research Council, as well as the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendments. This program started in 2022, right after the MPCA came out with that phosphorus crediting system that was mentioned earlier. I'll let Paula dive into the details of that, but after it was created, we organized a focus group as our partnership to figure out how we can get people to start using it. And what we found is there's a lot more barriers than just getting credit for phosphorus removals. There is, how do I make a plan? How do I do tree canopy cover mapping? What do I do with all of these materials that I have now collected? So there was a lot of barriers out there for people, and so we started building up this program. And we're continuing to build it today. We continuously get feedback from our workshop participants. We've done over a dozen so far, and continue on. For those of you who are listening right now, we have upcoming virtual workshops in November if you're curious about what we're doing and what we're up to. And you can find those online on the Clean Sweep program at the Water Resources Center website. So the program was built to create tools, resources for everybody who's doing enhanced street sweeping programs. And these tools include a fact sheet on how to develop a plan. It goes through this step-by-step process, including tree canopy cover mapping and all the things that you need. We've developed how to test your sampling materials, like how do you do that to get the most bang for your buck when you're trying to get phosphorus credits through the MPCA. But I think the most exciting tool that we've come up with, and Paula has helped a lot with this, is our quick estimating tool. There was a question earlier about, how do you do a plan and plan for it, and this really helps you with that. So if you are a city trying to do a plan, you can put in each and every route. You just put in the miles of lane miles of your routes. You put in if it's low or high tree canopy cover, how many sweeps you want to do per month, and it'll spit out and tell you how much your wet mass will be, so you can start planning for that materials management. It'll also tell you your estimated phosphorus removal credits through the MPCA, and it now is customizable as of last year, where you can estimate how much that program is going to cost you. So you can change the values of how much you think a truck is going to cost, how many miles you have to go to dump those materials, like all of these other extra factors. You can estimate your cost, you can estimate also your staff time, because we've heard that that is also a limitation. So this is like a one tool to rule them all, this quick estimating tool, QET. It's also available on our website as well as all the other fact sheets. So, I encourage you to go online and see what we've been up to. And then the other way that I also relate to this topic is the University of Minnesota recently got an LCCMR grant. One of the barriers we have to materials reuse in street sweeping is that we don't know what's in these materials. We've got a really good handle on phosphorus and nitrogen, but we don't know about microplastics or PAHs. We have like a little bit of heavy metal stuff, but we want to do some more research here in Minnesota, GROs and DROs, all the things. So we're going to have a free testing program that we're going to launch in January, where you can sign up for that and get some free materials testing, which will help inform us and give the MPCA more information, so they can tell you can do hopefully more things with these materials rather than sending them to a landfill, which keeps on getting more and more expensive. So that's just one part of the LCCMR grant. We're also looking at creating partnerships to, again, coordinate multiple cities and counties on what to do with these materials, once we have more information behind it. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on. It's just, again, just great to be here in Minnesota, where we have all this funding and support to do more.
Wonderful, thank you, Maggie. Our next panelist is Paula Kalinosky, who is a hydrologist in the Stormwater Research, Engineering, and Outreach Unit at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. So Paula, from your experience and professional opinion, how do you relate to this topic, and what can you tell us about the Minnesota context?
Yeah, thank you, Andy. My involvement with this topic goes back to kind of having, sorry, I'm gonna tell a little story, midlife kind of, what am I gonna do with my career here, and making a switch from being a science teacher and going back to some roots I had in engineering, and going to the University of Minnesota and looking for someone who might have a study, and it turns out there was a study that was gonna be starting up on street sweeping. It was actually already in motion, but they didn't have the graduate students. So if you asked me, was I a lifelong champion? It's very inspiring to sit next to lifelong champions of street sweeping, but it was just serendipity for me. So I worked on the Prior Lake street sweeping study. That was the subject of my graduate thesis. One of my technical advisors, Mike Trojan in the audience, also the predecessor, my current position at MPCA, and also a champion of street sweeping, and Ross Bintner, who was this study was kind of his brainchild. That study was a massive study, 2 years long, compared different tree canopy, 9 routes. They varied in tree canopy and sweeping frequency, so it was a 3x3, I guess, low, medium, high canopy cover. You can ask me about that later. And the frequency of sweeping was either weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, every 4 weeks. And we came up with incredible data that really, tree canopy, yes. If you have a tree canopy over or near the street, you are gonna collect way more phosphorus for the same sweeping frequency. And then also, relationships to how frequently you sweep. And really, having not thought about it as much maybe as some people had before, one thing that really stood out to me is you could sweep every week in a new, well, maybe not, an active construction that would sort of obviously have dirt, but, a residential area with few trees, and you would always come back with something in the truck. It's that the truck never came back empty. There was always dirt to be picked up. So from that, we developed a series of what someone referred to as a model. I guess it is a model. It's a series of regression equations that to predict, on average, how much phosphorus would you collect if you were sweeping this many times per year or in these months at this frequency, and it's got limitations. One of the biggest ones is that at the very last minute, we decided I needed to convert from English units or imperial units to metric, and I made a mistake. And so my thesis has an errata, which is like after all of that time and energy, it's like, oh man, alive. So if you do look for it, make sure you find the errata page, because otherwise those equations won't work. So anyway, and then moved on to consulting, and in that capacity, it took a little while, but we worked with a couple of cities, Forest Lake, and watershed districts, and developed sweeping plans so they could use the information that we had developed from the University of Minnesota study to make a case to their city council that, hey, if we increase our street sweeping, we can really increase our phosphorus load reductions for a pretty, at a pretty cost-effective level. And while one of the cities was working on this, I caught wind of another study at the University of Minnesota. So this is the one that, this is a second follow-up study that took the prior lake study and expanded that to other municipalities within the Twin Cities area to see if those relationships that we had found in Prior Lake, applied across the broader area. I did not participate as a researcher or a student in that research, but I did get pulled in to the technical advisory committee when MPCA decided to, was using those study results to develop a street sweeping crediting calculator for phosphorus. So Mike Trojan, who was in my position at MPCA at the time, understood the importance of this work and worked with the University of Minnesota and another consultant to develop a credit for street sweeping. And it's based on measured amounts of, maybe I can go into that one later, but we can talk about the crediting calculator later. But that is a critically important thing for our MS4 communities, for our permittees. So I think I'm talking in a bit of a scattered way. I now work at MPCA after 10 years in consulting. And so I am the coordinator of the Stormwater Manual. So I work on this type of problem where we develop guidance, we develop tools, we develop crediting methods for our practitioners and our permittees. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paula. Our next panelist is Randy Neprash of Neprash Consulting and of the Minnesota Cities Stormwater Coalition. So Randy, from your perspective and experience, how do you relate to our topic today?
Lots of ways. And I appreciate what you guys said, mostly because now I get to say a good bit as well. So thank you. Thank you for that. The Minnesota Cities Stormwater Coalition is about 100 MS4 permittees throughout the state. And we are just always looking for cost-efficient ways to improve and protect water quality. partly because it's a good idea and partly because the regulations require that we do it. This is pretty clearly a really important technique. And yet, as Roger has talked about kind of eloquently, and I feel your years of pain, we're slow to recognize it in some ways and in some places. Lots of regulators are completely infatuated with green infrastructure and infiltration, both of which are important methods and techniques, but slow to recognize something that is not in that category. Lots of the regulators really like structural build-us stuff. And then once you've built it, it'll do good things on into perpetuity. It turns out to be not the case. If you don't maintain it, it won't work. We've now discovered that stormwater ponds have some problems that we didn't know about. Even the simplest structural technique we had turns out to be problematic. And the regulators don't like the idea of cities got a budget for this every year and can zero out that budget at their discretion. They're not comfortable with that. I'm really struck by and fascinated by what's happened here in Minnesota. There were two things that really struck me compared to the stuff what you were talking about. First one is the focus on leaves, coarse organic material. Every time I see the abbreviation COM at the end of a web domain name, I now think about coarse organic material instead of whatever the hell else it stands for. So we looked at leaves, and man, it was important and significant pollutant load reductions if you actually go chase them effectively. The other piece, though, that fascinated me, I didn't realize this until about 3/4 of the way through your presentation, is Roger seems to have really looked at the streets, before sweeping and after sweeping, really looked at modeling. What we've done in Minnesota, and I'm really curious to hear your reaction to this, one of the things we've done in Minnesota is we looked at the sweepings. What did we actually pick up? And Paula and company worked out this whole method of turning an incredibly heterogeneous mess of sweepings into a homogeneous powder that could then be analyzed, and we could figure out what was in it pretty easily and effectively. Ingenious stuff, but it's a very different sort of approach to look at the sweepings instead of the street or modeling. So the other element that we've done in Minnesota is a kind of multi-pronged approach. So we started with the research, and we found that we were picking up lots of nutrients, and we could do it really cost efficiently. So then that drove a whole bunch of other things. The practice got recognized and picked up by the regulator. And Paula talked about that, crediting, incorporating it into the stormwater manual. Then we've instituted an outreach and technology transfer program to get this information to the local practitioners. Maggie talked about that and is doing brilliant work in that area. And then a last piece here is potential funding. So Clean Water State Revolving Funds, the Overflow and Sewer Grant Program, buying street sweepers here in Minnesota is eligible for those fundings. Because we've recognized it as a water quality method, technique, now cities can use their stormwater utility funds to pay for street sweeping. Watershed districts that formerly would not have thought about doing street sweeping, but have a good bit of money, are now instituting street sweeping programs. This is all stuff, it's like a whole package of material, and if it all works together, we should, I hope, see, and we're already seeing a good bit of it around the state, we will see widespread implementation. That's huge. That's just immense. And I should stop talking. But please, I encourage people, please ask us a couple types of questions. One is about leaves, because this whole thing with leaves is a really big deal. But the second one is, what additional research and what other applications for street sweeping? I keep wanting to call it sweet streeping. It is sweet, you know, it works. But ask us about those things, please, so that we can talk about it more.
So
Thanks.
That's wonderful, Randy. Do you want to add something, Roger?
he wanted me
Please.
to respond to. So, yeah, it's like we're on a presidential debate and I get my time. Just kidding. We have sampled street material debris that's been picked up by the street sweeper. But what we've determined is that it's very difficult to get a representative sample because, you know, when the street sweeper goes down the street, it's picking up material and then it's done its job. It's actually bumping along. It's pretty, you know, it's not a real smooth ride. I've been in them before. And so it's starting to stratify the material. So it's very difficult to, so it really, if you're focused on one thing, organic material or whatever, it's much easier to say, yeah, I can pull out. So there's a part of me that says, if I collect an after sample, I didn't go into the technique. When we do a sweeper, you know, performance study, we put it down, we know exactly how much, we know its particle size distribution, we hit the machine at a given speed, we time it, we just monitored fugitive dust. We have all this information, and then, you know, then we suck it up with a vacuum cleaner, and then we can compare that particle size distribution, those weights. It's really easy. It's real simple. It's all, we analyze the whole thing. You know, how do you analyze the whole hopper, 5, you know, yard hopper? Maybe you say, oh, go just sweep for, you know, half an hour or whatever. That might make sense. In other words, send that sweeper out on a short run and get everything it gets and analyze it all. If you really want to know, that's a bigger exercise. So it's so much easier to pick it up. But do recognize the sweeper is not going to pick up everything. So that's been the problem. The only solution was in the work that was done in, which I never even mentioned, in Burbank and Glendale in 2012. Shout out to Chris Minton, Larry Walker and Associates was involved. They hired me as a sub. They basically, I believe they put the material, they did some of that, but they put the material in a waste container. And I'd be wrong, maybe Chris, that was another study, but they put it, and instead of taking it out of the machine, they had the hopper, they had it poured, that was Seattle, I'm sorry. Seattle poured, put it in there. So it's so much easier to sample it out of a bin of a certain size. And they can then know that they don't want a lot of it, they just want us to fill that up to there. And it was so much easier for them, and they did that. So they did both things, in pseudo on the street and also that. So I hope that answered that.
That's wonderful. You want to respond to that?
No, I don't want to respond to that. But
okay.
I do want to make one short comment that hasn't been made yet, which is on the new work on street sweeping. Roger's talked a good bit about what happened in Florida. We've talked a good bit about the work being done here in Minnesota. The one other state that I'm aware of that's done really nice work on this just lately is New Hampshire.
Yes, I agree.
Jamie Houle and company doing just great work, but also doing something similar to what we've done here in Minnesota, which is they're folding it into their regulatory program.
Oh,
and
excellent.
building a measurement and crediting system.
I heard that
folks
that
in New
was
Hampshire-
happening. That would be number 3.
Yes.
3 down,
Yes.
47 to go.
Exactly. And one of the neat things about New Hampshire is that EPA Region 1 has been involved in that process all along, which is kind of cool, because we're still looking for EPA to come along on this.
Fun fact about New Hampshire is that they also named their program Clean Sweep. We did not talk to each other, we just both named it the same thing, which is kind of funny.
Okay, fun fact, I did a webinar on Forester in 2000. Clean streets, Clean streets mean clean streams. Clean streets, clean streams.
No, there you go.
And the project I'm working on is clean streets, clean seas.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
So it's a theme because they are related.
And I'll just throw a shout out to Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin's actually done quite a bit of work too on street sweeping, and there's been data collected there too. So they're making progress.
Bill Selbig.
Yeah, Bill Selbig's been making some progress there. So for our audience, if you're in Minnesota or if you're elsewhere, and any of these resources sound like things you would like to incorporate to build your street sweeping program in your location, our speaker and our panelists, I'm going to say this without asking them beforehand, I think would love to share any and all these resources. We're also copying links into the chat for many of these things and many of these programs and tools, and we will also share other resources as needed.
If anyone wants the PowerPoint or just the if you don't put a link to it, I'll send it directly. Just send me an email, and you can use it. You can put your name on it if you want. I don't care. I just want it to get out there. So.
Very good, yeah, and you can send an email to me and I can share that PDF as well. So, very good, thanks, Roger. So let's dive into some questions. I'm gonna ask one quick question, then we're gonna go to audience questions, and hopefully it's a quick question. We'll see how you respond. So Roger kind of laid the groundwork with the hurdles and roadblocks over the years that have either slowed street sweeping down or set it back. I'm super interested in what are our current biggest challenges and hurdles? What is standing in our way right now that's keeping us from having street sweeping all over the place and making very, very cost-effective capture of pollutants? Any of our panelists can respond at any time to any of the questions. So whoever would like to go first, dive in, please.
Well, I'll just say it. Number one is removing the cars.
Okay.
You know, one of the things I do when I simulate in SimPTM is I assume I'm at the curb and say, but I do have a parameter called parked. And I can tell you what percentage of that curb is being blocked. And I can go in there and I can change that. And the difference is night and day. It is so important. So that's the number one, but there's got to be a bunch of other ones. But that's the number one of obviously the type of equipment that you're using for the purpose of the sweeping, as I mentioned. It's air machines are best for residential city sweeping. And you know, you want to run a tandem operation? We were talking about tandem, Paula. The communities that are actually doing that, I mean, whoa, love it. That's the best thing you can do. But most won't do it because it's two pieces of equipment, so much more expensive. So,
Others.
I would just kind of say the same things I said before. When we hold these workshops and we have these small group discussions, we always hear the same three things. And in my opinion, it's materials management. What can I do with these materials, which will hopefully be partially solved by this LCC-MAR grant that we'll be working on. We always hear about staffing too. I feel like people don't talk about it enough, but you know, if you do enhanced street sweeping, it's basically going to be in the spring and the fall. But where do you get that extra staffing boost in order to do that? And you know, all these consulting firms or contractors that do that work too, they also get overwhelmed. So like, how do you do it when it matters most at these critical times with the limited staff resources that you have? And then also just the cost, which I feel like in Minnesota, we're getting more support for, more state grant funding, more local funding. We've got some incredible programs through our watershed districts at Ramsey, Washington, and also out in the East Metro. But it's the cost and the capital investment into these equipment too. You know, how do you cover those costs and how do you justify that? It's always a challenge. So it's, yeah, materials management, cost and staffing.
Yeah, I'll just tag on Maggie's point about the materials management. There's a lot of unknowns there. And this is, again, something that Maggie put together this fabulous grant application, and MPCA is partnering, you know, on that effort. But so we'll be looking at what's in that street sweeping material. And we're doing a little bit of preliminary testing too. MPCA had a bit of money we are partnering with. I really need to give a shout out to Coon Creek Watershed District. They've helped us to collect pilot group amount of samples to analyze for some additional contaminants. Things like diesel range organics. The organics, it's kind of funny because they're volatile, and if you stockpile your material, it seems like you would lose those anyway. But diesel and gas range organics, the RCRA metals, copper, arsenic, PAHs, carcinogenic PAHs, and pesticides. And we're comparing those to the residential and the industrial soil reference values, which is one metric you can, for those pollutants, which is one metric you might use to determine whether whether it's appropriate for fill, but also, what facilities might accept it if you do have to dispose of it. In the 6 samples that we submitted from last fall, I believe, none of them triggered the PAH limits, but we didn't have the full set of carcinogenic PAHs tested at the time. None of them triggered anything from metals or gas range organics. Maybe if Justine is listening from Coon Creek, she could put in the chat whether there were any pollutants of concern that were above the soil reference values in that set of sweepings. We did have one. We did another round in July. I should say that Justine did that because they collected samples. None of those triggered any concerns for metals, but there was one sample that was at 46-ish PAP equivalents, which is that's our metric on carcinogenic PAHs. But the others were all well below. So as at this point, we're not finding a lot, but it's a very small group of samples. It's helped us to work through this process of how do you analyze this material, because it's not easy with conventional labs. The university worked out, and it wasn't me, it was Sarah Hobby, the PI, worked out a process to be able to look at these different fractions of material and determine their nutrient content, but it's not a process that's easy for conventional labs to take on board. So,
Other hurdles?
So when I think of hurdles, I think in terms of what more do we need, what needs to happen to get this implemented more widely. One is more research, better support for the benefits of sweeping, some of which we still don't understand and we still have not quantified, which is a really important element to the whole thing. Another is this question of cost. That's obviously a problem with stormwater everywhere. But one of the factors is that we have regulatory drivers at the state level, but even at the local stormwater design standard level, that push everybody toward building structural BMPs. And so that eats up a lot of money. And it means that there's less money to put into this sort of technique, which appears to have the potential of reducing pollutant loads much more cost efficiently, but still, there's this driver towards structural stuff. The last piece in my mind is bringing the street sweeper manufacturers along. If this is as important as it is, if that's legit, and we can bring along the other 47 states and get this widely implemented, that is a complete game changer, as far as I can tell,
Yes.
in terms of the market for street sweepers.
Yeah, and
One of my principles is once I start seeing this reach the sort of level it should, I'm going to be buying stock in street sweeper manufacturers.
And
I'm not a financial advisor and I don't play one on television, but that's one thing I'm going to do.
And
We're not there yet, though.
Randy, okay, I gotta say it. I wasn't gonna say anything because it's okay, I understand, but we put out there that we were willing to do a national testing program. We would stay in Los Angeles for up to 3 weeks, whatever it took, whatever manufacturer, Elgin, Temco, Swartz, those are the 3 big ones. Bring your machines. We're probably going to end up charging you something. It's going to be insignificantly small. We were kicking around maybe $5,000 for test, which would run 2 runs. And we did webinars with them and reach outs. Ranger, yes, I'm saying it. And we were just shocked when not one American manufacturer was willing to come to the table. But don't worry, Ranger knows plenty of contractors, so we got sweepers. But from our perspective, because our focus is microplastics, well, isn't this a good idea? Because the manufacturer sweepers would be brand new. They would do the best job. They would be tweaked the best they can tweak, because that's just what they want to do. So maybe the fact that they didn't show up, now we have a set of data that shows us the range of sweepers with the range of operator skills. We had situations where, no, you don't operate a sweeper on a regular basis. You're the president of the company. What are you doing running the machine? But you did. And that's why the number was not as good as it should have been. So it made us realize that there were so many other factors we weren't taking into consideration. But I'm telling the stormwater community, I'm telling you, if you want better technology, demand it. And I'm telling those manufacturers, you're sitting on a gold mine. Let's start participating. Let's compete. They'll buy your machine for a lot more reasons than this, but give them a Consumer Reports level of understanding of how effective your machine is in this very, very important. And yes, we will include organics. You know, we have to put everything there, even put trash in there. I mean, there's all kinds of things we can do in that process, but we have to get them to participate. And the only 2 manufacturers that showed up were not American. They were SweepRite out of Canada, but they do have an operation that's opening up in Detroit, so they're not going to have to worry about tariffs. And we had the largest street sweeper manufacturer in the world, Fayette, that brought their Ravo line and their Scarab. And those 2 machines actually, along with the Temco regen that we got from a contractor, great contractor in Southern California, they outperformed everyone else. So my message is, don't be afraid to compete. You know, we're going to be transparent, but it'll be gold, silver, bronze. And maybe you say, well, I don't like being a bronze. Well, then get out of the business of manufacturing so many mechanical street sweepers and start, or convince communities that the tandem operation is the way to go, and that makes more sense to do that if the focus is on water quality. So, okay, that's it, I'm done.
So Roger, I love that, and I want to invite you to our 2026 Sweeping and Salting Showdown. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but we line up all the sweepers, and we put this big pile of debris in front of them, and they sweep one by one. And we had Elgin sweepers, Schwartz's, SweepRite, we had all of them lined up, including some electric. And they all swept where we could see side by side how well they did. So
Yeah, but it's important that you're being realistic about the material you put down. So that's what I would change there, but I like the idea. The problem in the past, I didn't show the slide, is the first sweeper test I saw is like all of this crap on the thing just piled that deep. I was like, do they have any idea of what's really street dirt looks like? I mean, yeah, it can be. Hey, I did Champaign-Urbana on a 208 when I was a young man, and I measured 26,000 pounds per curb mile after snow melt, okay? But that's rare. It's you know, it's rarely over 600 or 700 pounds per curb mile. It's generally around 200 or 300. That's what you'd be testing. Don't give them, you know, I talked to the operator for Fiat, Ravo, and he's a great person. He's like, I come in there and that's the competition. I say, I'm gone. This is ridiculous. You don't even understand what it is you need, because you don't even understand how much material you have to be looking at. But I love the idea. I'm in.
Roger will make it all scientific. Very sophisticated.
I was going to go the other way and call it the street sweeper drag race, because that's what it sounds like to me.
Who can pick it up the fastest?
That's right. Those are the best and the fastest. All right, we're going to dive into some questions. I think we took an in-person question last, so if we can do an online question, we'll take your questions now.
For the cost-benefit studies, are you aware of any that look at life cycle costs with operation and maintenance? A lot of cost-benefit comparisons seem to compare the annual cost of sweeping to the upfront construction cost of traditional BMPs. However, if you annualize the upfront BMP costs over a 20 to 30-year lifespan, this has a big effect on cost-benefit comparisons against sweeping over 20 to 30 years.
I mean, I'll let you handle this one. It's in there.
Well, yeah, I think, so I'm wondering if this is coming from Noah Check. Because I know that he does a meticulous job of tracking all this stuff. So I guess I don't know of any that I can point to that say the cost of these BMPs is a life cycle of the structural BMPs that are in the comparison. Certainly the street sweeping cost benefit, that $1 per curb mile on an annual basis takes into account the life cycle of the sweeper. So it's kind of an annualized cost over what you think the sweeper is going to be replaced in 8 years, 10 years. So, and that's how the person asking the question stated it. It's annualized. But I am not sure that when those comparisons are made, whatever the source of the cost for so many pounds of phosphorus coming using a bioretention facility or underground infiltration facility, those costs, I can't point to a study that I know for sure that they were based on the life cycle analysis of those BMPs. So.
Yeah, I haven't seen an official study, but I know that, we have charts like that in our presentations that you can find on the Clean Sweep website. But I know that when I was at Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed, I did that. I annualized the cost and compared it to like an iron enhanced sand filter and other things. And it was, you can get it for like $200 a pound, as low as that. But then you're right, Noah Check over at the City of St. Cloud, he did some great cost comparisons as well as Ramsey Washington Watershed District. But I've never seen like an official research study on it.
Yeah, I'll just say the sweeping cost benefit analysis that has been adopted by Clean Sweep does include things like, how do you dispose of your materials? What's the annual cost of that? So the maintenance part, apart from what you might call maintenance, the sweeping, is included in that. Replacement parts for the sweeper and all that, those pieces, fuel. But again, yeah, if you want to compare apples to apples, I guess go to the source where they've looked at the life cycle cost of the structural BMP. So.
Other thoughts?
Well, I was just going to say, one of the sources for this cost data is John Sensaloni's study.
I know what he did.
And knowing John a little bit, he's an incredibly thorough and comprehensive researcher. And if he's listing cost information, the idea that he's not including full life cycle cost seems really improbable.
I don't know, so I'm not going to comment, but you would think that that's how they got there. So, but it's a great question because, and yes, they have to be replaced. Sorry, everything has an end point, and that's a good number, about 8 years. So we've tested the ones that are beyond that and not pretty. Glendale, Burbank, the work we did, some of the machines were pretty old. So, but it's out there, that data's out there. And that's another thing, if you hear something that I said that you want to see the document, I can point you to where it is or I can send it to you. So don't be afraid to ask. I'm semi-retired, I got nothing else to do.
All right. Questions from the audience in the room?
Nobody else raised their hand? Okay. I already asked the question, so. But let's just assume in a perfect world that everybody did street sweeping to optimize water quality and did it the right way and so forth. Does or how does that affect the way we look at stormwater management downstream?
Well, to me, it's a no-brainer. Then other process. I mean, remember, I spent decades giving a presentation called Sweep Before You Treat. I was colleagues with the late, great Gary Minton. You think I'm going to say you don't have to treat? Of course you have to treat. Sweep before you treat, but you have to go after the dissolved material. And that's the big challenge. The street sweeper is going to remove a lot of it before it becomes a dissolve, but it's not going to get all of it. So what the things that are happening here, that, you know, iron infused sand filters, the sand filters that I know about that have been used extensively in the Seattle metropolitan area, those make a lot of sense. The leaf compost filters, those technologies that have other type of material that can remove the dissolves, because the dissolves, once it's already in there, you have to remove it. And if you don't, you're going to have the algae blooms and you're going to have all the negative consequences. So, but I did find out something I didn't mention, and just so you understand, street sweepers pick up dissolved metals before they become dissolved. And we did a project, Gary and I did, and we proved that if I pick it up, it was a container storage yard, Port of Seattle. The year was like in the 90s somewhere, maybe mid 90s. In any case, if we go around and we regularly sweep it with an effective air machine, then we're picking up this metal, and a portion of it, if it becomes saturated and in solution, will go immediately dissolve. And that's what the concern was with all the aquatic species, the salmon and everything else we're interested in. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking you have to do. And along the line, you know, sand filters, rain gardens, all of these things are good. But with the sweeping, guess what? The load is going to be different. It's going to be lower.
Yeah, I'll just tag on that. I feel that we acknowledge sweepers don't get everything, and obviously, you know, when you're not sweeping, there are times when you're washing pollutants off the road. We can't get out there before every single rain, so you can't eliminate the load that's going to the downstream BMPs. And one thing that might help us adopt sweeping more generally is to put a little bit more research into are we saving on maintenance costs of downstream BMPs? This would take a bit of a long-term study. If we're doing more sweeping, because that's something that makes it, you know, that can improve the cost efficiency of those BMPs as well, since their maintenance lifespan will be extended. And I've been wondering about this for a very long time, ever since I started working on this question of what's in street dirt. But we don't have good answers to that. And I'm kind of hoping at some point we can do a paired watershed study of a type where we've got someone who's been doing a lot of sweeping for a number of years versus an area where maybe they're just, they still do the basic spring fall, or they've only recently adopted something more robust, and look at a downstream BMP. You know, what are those accumulation rates? If you can get two watersheds that are, you know, comparable, paired watershed study, and you know, are we reducing the buildup of sediment in our ponds when we adopt enhanced street sweeping? And if so, that's a really good thing to do, because it's incredibly expensive to clean those out. So, there.
Other thoughts?
So the simplest, almost completely unhelpful response is that the discharge from urban stormwater systems would be better, which would be a good thing. More specifically, one of the names that hasn't come up today is Larry Baker, researcher with the University of Minnesota and the PI on the first study done in Prior Lake that Ross and Paula both worked on. Larry often talked about this whole question of significantly reducing solids and how much difference that might make, and we just don't know, in terms of sediment deposition in stormwater ponds and lakes, you know, that are immediately downstream. Also, less sediment going into all these thousands of decentralized rain gardens and infiltration trenches that tend to get clogged and otherwise lose function because of that sediment. If we can reduce that sediment, it might be a big deal. And street sweeping is a way to do that. The other piece that has stuck in my mind that I'm fascinated about is bacteria. One of the toughest, most wicked challenges that we have in stormwater, but one that we have to address. Minneapolis, the city of Minneapolis did a wonderful study, can't recommend it more highly, on bacteria in their system. And one of the things that they found, they looked all over the place. I mean, bacteria is everywhere. We all know this. But they looked all over the place for where they could find high concentrations of bacteria. And one of the places they found it was in street curbs, gutters, street gutters. Remember Roger's comment about where street sweepers do a great job of picking stuff up? That's a connection we ought to make. I'm particularly interested, I've had some conversations with the park board in Minneapolis that haven't really gone anywhere, but we have urban lakes, we've got cities in California that are concerned about beaches where they're getting lots of urban runoff.
Right.
They're getting really high bacteria loads. What happens here in the Twin Cities is those loads get high enough that they have to close the beaches, those lakes that are really popular. Well, what if we really looked at the urban drainage areas, we did concentrated enhanced street sweeping to pick up as much bacteria as possible. We put SAFL baffles into all the catch basins and then cleaned them out regularly and frequently. Basically did everything we can think of to address bacteria in the urban runoff. Would we be able to make those lakes swimmable longer, more often? Would that work in California beaches? I'm fascinated by that. And nobody seems to be working on it yet. But that's a downstream effect that could be really dramatic.
Any other?
No, but shout out to Larry, who told me at the time that I started working with him that it was gonna be a big deal, and I didn't quite believe him at the time.
So
go ahead.
I just have to say that the last project I did with AMAC, Foster Wheeler, that became Wood, before I left the firm and started my own little company, Cascade, just so I could continue working, was the focus. It was Prescott, Arizona, and the concern was bacteria. It was E. coli, high concentrations in E. coli. Now, this is arid environment. The streams are not perennial. They're, they basically dry up, and then when the rains come, well, the rains can come, and you might have seen that on the news not too long ago. So bacteria was a huge problem, and I did not even put forth the idea that street sweeping could be effective there, because I've never seen any data that suggests that it is. And what they found out, there was a lot of bacteria accumulating within the structures, the literature. I don't know if we found that out in Prescott, but if you look at the literature, those catch basins, those underground vaults and everything else, there's a lot of bacteria that's accumulating there. Whether that actually gets mobilized and becomes an issue, but I didn't know that the gutter was such it should be. So that's an interesting idea. I mean, I have no idea whether it would be effective, but we did find out that the biggest concern about bacteria and how to deal with it was the homeless problem. Everyone has it. Communities that are, much warmer in the winter than maybe around here, they have it to a higher degree. And so the recommendation for the TMDL work that we did there and was to basically put in sanitation facilities, make a solid waste disposal opportunity, so that these communities that we have to deal with, because it's just a fact of life, and boom, that's when the E. coli is going to drop. So there can be other sources that are affecting our stormwater that we're not thinking about, and that the human source is one of the biggest in that situation.
Very good. We are rapidly running out of time today. I just want to say before I'm going to ask a couple more questions. First, if you have more questions, if you've posted them online, they will get shared with all of our panelists and our speaker. They will have an opportunity to answer those unasked questions. That will be shared as a PDF to the online, everybody that registered. If you're in the room and you have a question that you didn't get to ask, you can send an email to me personally with those questions. I will add it to that Q&A, and I will include that to our panelists and speaker. I'm going to steal one question from the online. I think we're due for an online audience, and then we'll do our closing question. The question I'm going to ask, this is a great question. I pulled it out of the list. If I'm a city or a watershed district or some other organization, I have $100,000 I can spend on street sweeping. What would you recommend I do with that money?
Wow.
Oh gosh, I want to know how big is the city?
Exactly.
What kind
It
of
all
program do they
depends,
have? Gosh, that's a hard question.
It's a good
without more
question, I
information.
think.
I think it's a good one, and I think it goes back to the planning tools that Maggie has developed, and the process for putting together an enhanced street sweeping plan, and what are you gonna prioritize? What is your water quality priority? That is the first thing. Not what type of sweeper, I mean, that is a very important question, but where do you need to sweep it? Those areas that are directly connected to a water body, that's especially one that you're protecting, those are the streets you need to clean. Whether you're gonna buy a sweeper outright, or you're gonna increase the contract sweeping that you're doing in that area, that's what you wanna spend it on. You know, so that's the first thing you have to do, just what is your priority area?
Well, you know my answer. Street dirt. Collect the street dirt in your community. The $100,000 will allow you to do a really good job. And you know, I love the fact that we have an international database on stormwater quality. Don't get me wrong. And I hail the people that put that together. But isn't it sad that there is so little street dirt information that was collected during the performance of those studies? Because that is much more powerful than concentration data. We can calculate concentration data if we can understand what's happening with the street dirt. And so that's where I put my money. I would do a pilot study for enhanced street sweeping, and I figure out where this material is, how contaminated it is, what is the concern of the community. And yes, you can take some samples and, you know, and catch a storm or two or whatever, but it doesn't have to be statistically determinate. Just go and see if it's translating to dirty water downstream. And then once you have all that information, then you can design a program, go to your city council, get the funding you need to implement that program. And, you know, and make sure if the parking's a concern, make sure you're getting cars off the street. By the way, those technologies were underway in the project I currently have. I have no time to tell you this, but one of the things Ranger and I will do is we will work with a class of students, millennials, smart ones, all right, that want to be IT, they want to be computer. University of California, Santa Barbara, I think it's this fall term, it might be the next term, but we're going to work with them, and we're not going to create the app. We're just going to tell them what we need that app to do. We got to link your URSA, that GIS system, with the routes of the sweeper, so we see them in real time, so that I can give you a notice when it's 1 mile away. I said that's vaporware. No one's done that yet, but that's what we have to do. Make it simple for the citizens, and you'll still make a lot of money in the process when you implement. So you don't have to come up with the whole fee. Sorry, I keep on spilling the beans here. But that's what I would do with it.
So I would have two recommendations. The first would be to contact Andy and make a contribution to the Minnesota Stormwater Research Council, because we want to, and you know, include the note.
It has to be.
For God's sake, put the money towards street sweeping research. The other recommendation would be go find some more money, because $100,000 just isn't going to be enough. But talk to the state. Talk to them about the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program. Talk to them about the OSG program. And it may be, you know, you can come up with enough money to buy the street sweeper up front, and then pay it off slowly but surely over time from your stormwater utility fee revenues. So
Yeah, you have to have a stormwater utility. You have to have a source of.
I thought you'd like the first recommendation.
Any other thoughts on how to spend? I'm glad you said that, Randy, because now I don't have to. Because I was going to say it if nobody said it. It's like,
It's my role in life.
it came up a number of times that we need to do more research, so obviously contributing to research. And the only thing I'm going to expand a little bit on what you just said, Randy, on go find more money, is I do know a number of cities that talk to their adjacent cities and have pooled their funds to buy a street sweeper, and then they share it.
Well, and talk to your watershed district.
And talk to your watershed districts if you have watershed districts, but I love the idea of getting more money or finding a partner so that you can start. So those are great suggestions. All right, we're going to close out our seminar today with our key takeaways. I'm going to ask each panelist to give key takeaways. You can reiterate something you really want to reemphasize, or you can add one tidbit that we haven't covered today. I'm going to start on the far end again where we started. Maggie, what is your key takeaway today?
Gosh, just thinking about that last question, I think that, if you're a city out there and you don't know where to start, I think that a lot of people get stuck because they look at all these Cadillac versions out there and they think that that's what they have to do. But, you can do it really simple. If you're just sweeping once in the spring and once in the fall, do twice in the fall. Do twice in the spring and the fall. You can do something really simple, like have an intern map all your tree canopy cover for all your different routes. You can use that information to enter it into the quick estimating tool, the QET, and then see how much bang you can get for your buck. It doesn't have to be the Cadillac. It can be the 1996 Geo Metro. So just start small.
Yeah, I like that. Key takeaway otherwise. So yeah, more is better. Again, it doesn't have to be the Cadillac version just because we talk about, my gosh, a sweeper never comes back empty. If you can't fund sweeping weekly, but you can fund it 2 extra times, that's a good thing, especially if you can do it at the correct, at the times of year when there's a lot of pollutants on the street. Otherwise, research needs for disposal is kind of, I guess that's what I've been focused on lately, so that's kind of what I'm gonna say. But yeah, we need to help figure out how to manage this material, perhaps collectively, because this is one thing I realized, with listening to MS4 is burden really falls on them as an individual organization, but it might be more efficient if we could do this regionally or had facilities that specialized in the kinds of material in managing that kind of material. So.
Sure. Randy.
So if I was to pick a single key item, it would be that this is important information and this is an important technique. And we are really bad at conveying a fact like that to the folks that need to understand it. The 2 principal audiences that I know of would be every local stormwater, stormwater program, but also the states that are running state programs as well. And in my mind, we're all, I think, very sympathetic and concerned about our friends and colleagues that work at US EPA these days. It's a tough place to work. And yet there are things that EPA can do and should do, and arguably only EPA can do. So having national EPA recognize that this technique is important and to make that clear to all the people who listen to them, the local programs, but also the states, would be hugely important. Having EPA support research. Elements of research within EPA have been decimated lately, but we still have these wonderful centers of excellence for stormwater infrastructure technology, one of which is University of Minnesota, NAMSA, and the University of New Hampshire, our partners in. EPA can direct some of that funding to go to street sweeping research. So it's a big deal. It's important. That's information that needs to be conveyed.
Wow, this is a tough one. I think really the major takeaway is, all of the technical stuff, that's important. but that's not the point. The point is, this is the source, the primary source. It's always been the primary source. No one has refuted that for 60 years, 60-some years. So get with the program. Join Minnesota, join Florida, hopefully join New Hampshire. Be the next state. Colorado, step up. Oregon, step up. Washington, step up. Get out of the Stone Age and realize that this is a technique that will get you there, and put that in your regulations, because that is going to be the driver. That's going to be the biggest driver. Because once that's there, then the manufacturers will know it's there, and they'll know that they have a market that's going to be there for a long, long time. Of course, they have markets everywhere, but they never really understand what's driving that purchase of that machine, what's driving the establishment of that utility, and that utility should be funding the street sweeping. It should not be it shouldn't be in the highway department. It needs to be in the stormwater department. And the bottom line is, it's up to us as the stormwater community to absolutely demand that this occurs. And that's when it's going to happen. It's like it's happening here. This state, in my opinion, is doing more than any other state. Even though Florida started it, you guys, I've been so impressed. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Very good. Well, as the moderator, I get to cheat a little bit and add a couple key takeaways myself. I don't know if you feel it in the room, or I feel like maybe up front, we feel like we've just hit the tip of the iceberg on this. There's so much more that we could say and talk about, and certainly more questions we could answer. I do want to encourage you to look for resources. If you're in a place that doesn't have credits or a regulatory framework, we have examples and we have tools. I think that's my big key takeaway, is we have things that can help you move to the next level in your spaces. I will say also, we have had other seminars on street sweeping. We will have future seminars on street sweeping. So tune in for those and other seminars that you can find our full schedule online. I want to thank you for being here, both in person and online, and I encourage you to see a future Stormwater Seminar Series event. But right now, help me thank our panelists and speaker for setting our topic today.